City, it's the Gary Nulll Show. And now, your host, Gary Nulll.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Nulll. Nice to have you with us. Broadcasting live and video streaming live from our studios in New York City. You can watch today's program by going to GaryNull.com or ProgressiveRadioNetwork.com. Today, we have a very special guest, a continuation of our conversations with remarkable minds, Dr. Vandana Shiva. Dr. Shiva is an internationally renowned environmentalist and social activist and was formerly one of India's top nuclear physicists. But today, she is leading the effort to educate the world about the dangers of genetically engineered seeds and plants. In the next few weeks, I'll be visiting Dr. Shiva at her special farm at the foothills in the Himalayas so that I can actually film over 6,000 different varieties of rice being grown, over 230 different varieties of mangoes. She has probably the world's largest selection of heirloom organic seeds. So we'll talk to her about the whole concepts of genetic engineering today. So that she will be with us for our extended interview. Then I'm going to be sharing the latest on DNA, everyone's DNA, and how it's influenced by words and frequencies. Recently, a friend of mine for a long time, he's called Shamni, but it's Sham Bhatnagar, who is quite simply the man who brought America into an awareness of chakra psychology, chakra rebalancing. He has always stated that throughout time immemorial in India and in the culture that he grew up, sound was important. The vibration of your voice was important, and hence the chanting, the singing, how you carried a wave of energy on your voice. Now I'll show you that he was right in this latest research, very exciting research. Also, I'll be giving you 8 surprising things you may be eating and not realize they're making you fat and what we can do about it. I'll have time for one commentary today, and it will either be Tom Engelhardt, Assassin-in-Chief from Tom Dispatch, or it will be Noam Chomsky's America's Rank Hypocrisy. Why is it only an atrocity when other countries do it? From Alternet. One of those two we'll share with you. But I don't often have time to give upcoming previews of some of the guests we have on our future shows. I want to do that at the very beginning because we have some phenomenal guests coming at you. For example, we will have next Monday evening, we will have a special evening with all the progressive candidates we can find. Already signed up will be Rocky Anderson, the former Utah governor from the Justice Party, former California Supreme Court Judge Jim Gray, and his Gary Johnson, the former governor from the Libertarian Party, a Massachusetts medical physician and environmental activist, Dr. Jill Stein from the Green Party. Now, this is not a debate, and it will be 2 to 3 hours long. It is my contention that what we independent, creative minds need at this time in our country, when we represent 50% of the total voters but are completely disorganized, we need to stop looking at the rhetoric and listening to the rhetoric of the official corporate left and right and start looking for people who truly care about us, the environment, our health, peace, and getting jobs back, but from a different mindset. The mainstream media has refused to allow any of these people a forum for a simple reason, the same reason they refused to allow Ralph Nader. Because once you hear the proposals of Ralph Nader versus anyone currently running in the mainstream, you'd realize how absolutely ridiculous their positions are and counterproductive. So we will have an opportunity to hear them, each being challenged on what they will do on all the major issues. And you'll have a chance to see why I believe The future is with third parties, and we can't empower third parties unless we acknowledge them. We can't acknowledge unless they have a forum. My goal is to try to get them all to work together. Forget the Green Party, forget the Justice Party, forget the Libertarian Party, forget all these constitutional parties, forget all of them. Just come together as the People's Party, the Truth Party, just one group. Then you've got power. Then you can do something good. That'll be one of the most interesting evenings ever. And it's never happened before, so you won't want to miss that. Also, continuing with our conversations with the Remarkable Minds, we are going to interview later in this week Professor John Casti. He is from Vienna. He is going to talk about X events. These are human-related events that lead to large systemic catastrophes. You won't want to miss this. He's a professor from Princeton, Harvard, and he tells us what he sees coming right now. You won't want to step away from that. Jesse Ventura, the former governor of Minnesota, will be on next week talking about the gang-like nature of our political parties in Washington and how corporations have bought the electoral and legislative processes. Jesse Ventura. Also, someone you have not heard, noted British scholar and journalist Christopher Bellagou. He is going to talk about why aren't anyone in the media taking a step back from the upcoming attacks that are almost inevitable against Iran from Israel and the United States and NATO, and looking at the larger picture. We're going to take a look at the life and tragedy of one of the Middle East's greatest secular progressive minds, Mohammad Mossadegh, the president of Iran before the Anglo-American coup that replaced him with the tyrannical Shah, a man of our selection, and hundreds of thousands of people were tortured and killed under the Shah, but with the training of our own CIA and the full knowledge and complicity of our White House and State Department. How would the Middle East look today if this revolutionary thinker had been permitted to serve as a leader? No one has discussed this. We will. Tomorrow, Professor Henry Grayson will talk about a conversation on how we are both the cause of disease and all disorders, but we're also the cure. So as you see, we have some really interesting guests coming up. And last evening, I had a 2-hour special on the nature of being a fascist country in a police state mindset. And we had some heavy hitters, Professor Peter Dale Scott, a professor at University of California, Berkeley, Professor Peter Phillips, professor of sociology at Sonoma University and publisher of Project Censored, Stephen Ledman, a progressive economist, investigative journalist. And for 2 hours, we talked about the erosion of civil liberties, human rights, and the demise of American democracy, and how the official left and the Democratic Party is promoting fascism, and why the rank and file and the unions are not calling them out on it. And what would happen if they did? Some extraordinary insights when they tried to, even on supposed independent, non-commercial radio networks. You won't want to miss that. That has already happened, but you can listen to that on the archive. So please download the Progressive Commentary Hour, which, by the way, is the most downloaded radio program in American radio, commercial or non-commercial. You won't want to miss that. Now let's go to our topics of the day. We have a lot to cover. Why is this story that I'm about to share with you so important? Because of the research that many individuals, Stanley Krippner and others, were doing in the 1970s at different laboratories, but much of their work had to be done quietly because it was considered unorthodox, unusual. It was called psi research. I was doing it at the Institute of Applied Biology and was one of only probably 2 scientists in New York City doing it. In fact, every night, individuals, scientists, physicians, researchers would come by the Institute and would follow studies I was doing. Now, yes, I was doing officially anti-aging medicine research. That was acceptable, though not appreciated at the Institute, because it was a very orthodox, ultra-orthodox research center for scientists looking for the next cure for cancer or a replacement for methadone. So it was very much into patented orthodox drugs. I was the guy upstairs doing the strange research, feeding rats green juices and feeding them raw sprouts and not putting them in cages and letting, at one time, 3,000 rats run around without any confinement. That freaked them out. That actually kept them out of the laboratory. It was great not having to come and peer in and see what I'm doing. But at the heart of what I was doing is psi research, which I almost never discuss, quite simply because some of the results and some of the studies were so unique in their phenomenology that unless you have someone who's open to understanding what was done and what the results were, they'd think you were nuts. But I'll explain one thing I did do that today has been independently verified. I found that individuals, and this is a very well-known study, it was published in the Journal of Psychotronic Research, and it was discussed all over the world in those circles, and it was the first of its kind. I was able to prove that individuals could impact the DNA of an animal. Hence, there was no charismatic part of it. In other words, it wouldn't matter what you said to someone or your charm. You either had the ability to cause an ascites tumor to shrink and save an animal, or the animal died. These were genetically bred animals that were used in almost all cancer research, and I had borrowed some animals. Their normal lifespan would be about 22 days. In this case, of 50 individuals, 6 were able to repeatedly, no matter how many times I tested them over a year-and-a-half period, they cured their animals. There was a great chiropractor. Interesting, of all the chiropractors in New York, he was known as the chiropractor with the healing hands, Dr. Morton Jacobs. He was at 79th and Broadway. There was also Dr. Thomas Kruth at the Order of St. Luke. There was a rabbi, Rabbi Abraham Wiseman from Brooklyn. There was Dr. Dolores Krieger, head of nursing at New York University School of Nursing. There was also Ogo Worrell, and there was a man known for absentee healing, and this had never been tested, and I was curious. His name was Harry Edwards, and he was the most famous healer in England ever. No one ever had a reputation as he did. In fact, he was a household name for decades through his healing sanctuary, which I would later visit and film him, and I filmed him doing what can only be described as a miracle. And thank goodness I caught it on film. In any case, when they were each doing their healing on the mice, I asked them, what's going on in your mind? Are you praying? Is it a meditation? Are you acting as a channel to have energy from some higher source come through you into this creature? And they each had a different explanation. Well, they were all right, because in the end they created something. Later I asked him to do different things. Meditate, which I just had a group of nuns do on an experiment. I wanted to see how would a group of nuns who spend a lot of their days in prayer, what would happen if in a garden they took a group of seeds and they prayed over those seeds for health and nutrients in the seeds, and then filmed that in time-lapse photography, not only while they were there, but then when they left. Take the same identical group of seeds out of the same batch and plant them elsewhere where the nuns were not aware, same soil, same light, same food, and then film those. Now you have a control. One group's being praying for, another group's not. The results of that I will have in 4 weeks. And I will show you the film and video footage of all this, and you can see for yourself some of the interesting phenomena. I don't know what the phenomena will be yet. The results are not in yet. It's just been complete, but it's a unique study. But I was doing something similar to this, but they weren't nuns. They were just these healers, and they would meditate over sprouts, and the sprouts they were meditating over would grow faster. Now, for those of you who know about the exchange of energies, and even those of you who've been to different counseling and workshops and retreats where exchange of energy, healing energy exists, it's a phenomena that I say cannot be explained. It can only be appreciated. If it works, appreciate it. If it doesn't, then don't. It was Bruce Lipton who began to put a defining face on this. that something was happening inside the DNA when energy is exchanged. Now, the body's number one nutrient is what? Muscle? No. No. Minerals? No. Only a small percentage of minerals. It's water. Up to 74% of your body's water. So therefore, the exchange of water, the quality of the water going in, is it a soft drink or is it pure water? Is it a fresh juice or is it a processed beverage, high in fructose, in chemicals? Again, it's an exchange. Now, it's something that most people would think is too insignificant to focus on, and yet I think it's absolutely essential because your body's going to use it. And we now know that the water in the body and the electrical transmissions and impulses that travel down the meridians and use this water are part of the way that we actually heal. After all, take one single sip, just enough to wet your tongue, of a contaminated water, and your whole body can be affected with cholera or with amoebic dysentery, and you could die. Healing water, healthy water, is essential, and I believe the healthiest water we can bring in is through juices from organic plants. This is the newest, and I just wanted to share this, and this ties all this together. And hence why I'm sharing this with you, because when you think positive thoughts, when you share positive energy, when you select a positive environment, when you have trees and running water, when you're around people who share the best that they are with you, when you're given positive reinforcement, when you are giving some nurturing, when you're given joy and happiness and humor, when you're given motivation, when you're around animals that love you, this all impacts the energy exchange, and the energy exchange impacts your DNA. The DNA then is the deciding factor of whether or not you go forward into health or forward into disease. Now, I've spent my entire adult life studying this and proving it. And I proved it in 47 clinical studies with over 30,000 individuals whose results have been published, whose results have been presented before scientific bodies. So it's no mystery, there's no secret. And now we have another piece of the puzzle. Even the music you listen to is a part of that. Quote, DNA can influence and be programmed by words and frequencies, from Grażyna Fossar and Franz Bludorf from Waking Times. Quote, the human DNA is a biological internet and superior in many aspects to the artificial one. The latest Russian scientific research directly or indirectly explains phenomena such as clairvoyance, intuition, spontaneous remote acts of healing, self-healing, affirmation techniques, unusual light auras around people, mind influences on weather patterns, and much more. In addition, there is evidence for a whole new type of medicine in which DNA can be influenced and reprogrammed by words and frequencies without cutting out or replacing single genes. Quote, only 10% of our DNA is being used for building proteins. It is this subset of DNA that is of interest to Western research and is being examined and categorized. The other 90% are considered junk DNA. The Russian researchers, however, convinced that nature was not dumb, joined linguists and geneticists in a venture to explore those 90% of the unused DNA. The results, findings, and conclusions are simply revolutionary. Quote, according to them, our DNA is not only responsible for the construction of our body, but also serves as data storage and in communication. The Russian linguists found that the genetic code, especially in the apparently useless 90%, follows the same rules as all of our human languages. To this end, they compared the rules of syntax, the way in which words are put together to form phrases and sentences, semantics, the study of meaning in the language forms, and the basic rules of grammar. They found that the alkalines of our DNA allow a regular grammar and do not set rules just like our languages. And do have set rules just like our languages. So human languages do not appear coincidentally, but all are a reflection of our inherent DNA. And then it goes into the actual studies and the people and what they were doing with what's called vibrational behavior, the DNA. Now, that then explains very clearly that what was being done in putting soft classical music into a room with 3,000 rats, the rats did not become agitated, hyper, cannibalistic, or tail-biting, as is common and was done downstairs in the regular laboratory. By feeding them foods that were prepared with joy and love. In fact, at that time, I had a restaurant called the Fertile Earth. Maybe some of you ate there. It was the first gourmet vegan restaurant in America. And it was packed, 400 people a night, and we only served 2 dishes, each always different every night. And the ingredients came from the farm, the Fertile Earth farm upstate, which was an experimental organic farm I had. But my chef was a person with great joy, and he was one of the most pure persons you'd ever meet. His name was Ron Gilbert. And Ron would sing with the food. In other words, I would walk in the kitchen, he would have a crown of broccoli, meaning he would take broccoli heads and put them around a steaming basket, and then he would put cauliflower around that and asparagus around that, and then he'd be singing to it. And I said, "What are you doing, Ron?" He said, "I'm singing to the vegetables." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because it imparts a different energy." And I remember some of the other people kind of looking at him, and I said, "Well, good. I mean, that's important." Because we know that when you're in a garden and you're around vegetables and you're talking with animals and you're talking with the bumblebees and the butterflies, you're in harmony. You're harmonizing your energy. Little did he know that there was an actual scientific basis that would later be proven, including this study. The DNA can be influenced by reprogrammed by words and frequencies. Now, that's the food that I brought over to feed them. I would take all the food at the end of the evening over to the lab, and I would feed them this organically grown, sang to, joyful food. Now, these rats lived 30% longer and in vital health as the other rats. When I would later give them L-carnosine and glutathione and many other nutrients, in addition to this, they even live longer than that. But this was the first time that I have been able to find in science that we actually could prove that we could change the lifespan. Now, the argument is, well, how did you change it? Well, I would say it's because the quality of the energy that was going in. Now we can go even further and define that, saying it was not just the energy, it was the vibration of the energy that went in. Therefore, by having happy food in your body rather than sick food, by having something that an animal didn't have to suffer and go through trauma and crisis and cry and scream like a slaughtered cow, whether it's kosher or not is irrelevant. It still goes through pain. Instead, putting something that is meant for us to become enlivened by, where the plant lives on in our body as our DNA. Therefore, there's a metamorphosing, much like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. The separation of one life into another. When you are vitalized, when you are healed, when you are healing. That's why it is so important to understand the basics. So this is revolutionary. And it's interesting, the work I did in 1972 at the Institute is now, just now, being replicated on how it works at the DNA level. I wasn't able to do the DNA research at that time because we didn't have the tools. But we sure did understand cause and effect. So now think about that the next time you're thinking, well, gee whiz, what should I eat? What should I drink? Should I accept this conversation? Should I accept this person? Should I accept this negativity? How many of you receive toxic emails, toxic phone messages, toxic letters, toxic comments? What do you think that does to your DNA? You think that might increase your breast cancer, prostate cancer, heart disease, and stroke rate? Oh, you bet it does. One more reason that if it's not positive, say goodbye to it. If it's negative and you associate with it, you become a part of it. Bruce Lipton was responsible for that. By the way, Bruce Lipton should be having a program in the very near future with us. We're going to have a progressive mind hour where we'll have rotating hosts, and Bruce Lipton is hopefully going to be one. Now, also, I promised you 8 things that you may be eating without realizing it can cause you to become fat. And we thank Martha Rosenberg of Alternet for sharing some of this. Well, first up, people rarely think of depression and depression drugs as being a weight gainer. They are. According to this, quote, classic depression is characterized by a decrease in appetite, weight loss, and general despondency. But in 1994, atypical depression debuted, a subtype of depression characterized by an increase in appetite and weight gain. And now we know that this was due to the drugs, including Prozac, Zoloft, Lexapro, Paxil, and antipsychotics like Seroquel, and Zyprexa, and Risperdal, all of which can pack on the pounds. Then artificial sweeteners. Interesting, many people eat artificial sweeteners or take them in their beverages or food because they think, well, it saves calories. There's 0 calories. Yes, there are 0 calories, but according to the latest research, including research from Yale Journal of Biology and Medicine, quote, sweetness is decoupled from caloric content. They fail to satisfy the sweet rewards system and actually further fuel food-seeking behavior. So the artificial sweeteners, like Splenda, also has molecular similarities to endocrine disruptor pesticides, so no to that. Antibiotics. The average child in the United States has received 20 courses of antibiotics by the time they're 18. Now, according to microbiologist Martin Blazer, published in the journal Nature, the most prestigious scientific journal in the world, by killing good bacteria, and by the way, when you kill good bacteria, think of what is happening at the genetic level. Quote, overuse of antibiotics can be fueling the dramatic increase in conditions such as obesity, type 1 diabetes, inflammational bowel disorders, allergies, and asthma. Endocrine disruptors. Now, we talk about that all the time in this program. These are chemicals called endocrine disruptors found in canned foods, microwave popcorn bags, cosmetics, carpet cleaners, and they're linked to breast cancer, infertility, genital deformities, and diabetes. Well, bisphenol A in baby food bottles and sippy cups and all this other stuff is one of your worst offenders. So look at the label and do not take anything with bisphenol A. Also, stardom young marketing. Bad eating is learned young, and unfortunately some of the worst messages from TV and parents in school, according to this journal Pediatrics in 4 to 6-year-olds, is that they're eating the gummy fruit snacks, they're eating all the bad foods. Not good. Then hooked on cookies, chips, pizzas, and ice cream. And then, of course, just not exercising. So those are the reasons that we are gaining a lot of weight without paying a lot of attention. I'm Gary Nulll, back in a moment with our guest, Vandana Shiva. Please stay with us.
Try to remember when we didn't have no shoes. We stuck together, just me and you. It took a long time to get what we got today. Now you want to give it all up for another guy. Baby, I'm telling you, don't let dreamers fool you. Be hard for me, baby, to build my life all over. 'Cause baby, you got the love that I really need. 'Cause if you leave,
We'll be going to our guest in just a moment. She's in India, and we're just trying to hook up with her on the telephone. With the moment we hook up with her, we'll go to her. In the interim, we're going to say hello to Luann Panesi, who is here. I'm going to give a short commentary, but first let me mention that we have a very, very important event coming up, and I want people to know that you are invited. So popular is this event that it originally sold out. But upon contacting people, we have opened up some seats, mainly because a lot of people who called up originally said, I'm going to come. Now when we're calling them, because we've had more people, way more people, call in than we could get in. This is the only one-time New York City premiere of my brand new feature film, and without question the hardest hitting film I have ever done, of all the hard-hitting films I've done. And there'll be a panel discussion afterwards. It will be streamed worldwide, 7 p.m., June 15th. That's a Friday evening. In New York, it'll be at the Ethical Culture Center, where we normally screen our films, because there's 1,000 seats and we can fill that up and get more people in than versus a small theater. I was just told by Jeremy that we have 7 seats. So if you'd like to join me for the war on health and how I look at the power and tyranny in our government, and you can come, but give a call. And our number to call for joining us is 877-627-5065, 877-627-5065. Now, I realize some of you don't have credit cards, too late to get a check-in, but I'm going to have a will call table. What that means is you can show up if you have a reservation and have not paid in advance, and all proceeds, by the way, are going to help the homeless vets in Florida. And there's a lot of vets that I help down there, so we're hopeful that we'll be able to feed and get clothing and medical supplies for as many as 200 or 300 vets. That's my hope. So if you want to show up and you don't have a credit card, just call this number I'm going to give you now and give a reservation. You can show up. Your name will be on a list, and you must get there. You must get there 1 hour in advance. And that means you got to be there at 6. It's at 60, I believe 64th and Center Park West. You can call Jeremy at 646-926-5434. 646-926-5434 if you don't have a credit card or check, want to pay cash, and just show up at the door. Now, at the Huntington Cinema Arts Cine on Saturday, the 16th at 1 p.m., I'm going to screen the same film for all of you out in Long Island who couldn't get reservations. You'll call there if you. I'll be there. 1-800-838-3006. 1-800-838-3006. And on Tuesday, June 12th at 7 p.m., A Matter of Health in Nanuet in Rockland Plaza. I'll be there also for 7 p.m. screening the same film. 845-627-3333. 845-627-3333. Now, do we have our guest on the line? No, not yet. Okay. We'll have her in just a second. Let's just say hello to Luann. Hi, Luann.
Hi, Gary. I got cut off there for a second. First of all, anyone who has not listened to your show from last night, if they want to get a really clear perspective, it was phenomenal. It was a 2-hour show that talked about the tyranny and the police state that we're in and how we evolved, the whole historical perspective. I for one, I never had such a good understanding of why we're at where we're at today. I had a phenomenal show. Everyone should download it. I'm getting a lot of emails. I've gotten 4 or 5 emails from people that are asking you what's going on with this whole Bain Capital situation. They heard that on a show that Clinton had supported Mitt Romney's money-making skills, and he said they were just sterling, and that he supported equity partnerships.
Because I think that in a minute or two we will have our guest up. Let me explain why we should understand this from a little different perspective. For a number of years, they were called corporate raiders. What they would do is they would go in and they would buy a large number of shares in a publicly traded company, enough to get them on the board of directors. They would then make offers to buy out the company. But what no one realized is they would use almost always other people's money. They would go to Wall Street, a Goldman Sachs. They would get a bridge loan. And let's say your company was a good, well-run company with no debt. Maybe you weren't having the sales that they believe you should have, but you were well-run. People worked there their whole lives. You cared about your community. You were an essential part of it. You had a lot of employees, generation after generation. What they saw is they saw that you were undervalued. So they would get control. They would then offer the shareholders, let's say if the stock was selling at $10, they'd offer it at $12. Now, people would think, gee whiz, they were appealing to people's greed. We'll take it. It could only get better. Wrong. They would then, let's say, buy your company worth $10 million. They would buy it not just for $10 million. They would get a $20 million purchase, and they would take back the additional $10 million as commissions and fees. Then they would have a company that had been profitable with no debt, now has $20 million in debt. In order to pay that, their new management would have to start downsizing jobs, cutting off profitable or unprofitable segments, and the whole purpose then was to squeeze every year as much money out for the people that originally invested. Mind you, they used other people's money. They frequently come in with less than 5% of the actual price themselves. But they frequently took between 100 and 300% profit out of the company. The average length of lifespan for a company that is taken over in an equity buyout, today is called equity partnerships, is about 7 years and 2 months. That's the average. But let's look at good companies that would still be around with their employees and services, Circuit City, Linens and Things. And at one time, Macy's was taken over by Allied and almost went broke. It wasn't a problem when Macy's was Macy's. Remember, there was a time when tens of thousands of companies in the United States were run very well. It was only after they were taken over that the crisis occurred. Therefore, these are vulture capitalists. They are not there to grow the community, to increase the wages and working benefits and standard of living of the employees. They are there to exploit it. That is what Mitt Romney, and that is also what all of Clinton's friends did, including Henry Kravitz and Silverstein and the other ones, and Leon Black and the other ones that are BlackRock, Capital. All of these are parasites. These are destructive individuals. They do not help a society. If a company survives, it survives in spite of them, not because of them. But unfortunately, you do not have people out there arguing it, such as myself, who could put to shame the arguments that these are good for the community and good for the workers. They are not. And they have taken hundreds of billions of dollars away from one-time well-managed companies that had no debt and made them impossible to run because they were so burdened with debt. The whole object of the exercise is how much can they get using Wall Street as their bridge loan, and then Wall Street got 10% of the deal plus non-reserve stock so it could pump and dump immediately, much like it did with Facebook. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, very clear.
Now we're going to take a quick break. We just were told that my guest is on. For those of you, I'm going to take this interview right to the top of the hour. For those of you who don't hear the entire show, I will give you a phone number that you can, 832-280-0066, that you, once we go off our land-based station, you continue to hear the rest of the interview. Back in a moment with my guest, who we just got on the phone in India. Hi, everyone. Now we go to the guest segment of our program, and it's once again a privilege to be able to continue with our Conversations with Remarkable Minds series. My guest is Vandana Shiva. She is an internationally renowned environmental and social activist and was formerly one of India's top nuclear physicists. She has been credited as the principal founding leader of India's ecological and ecofeminism movement. In 1982, Dr. Shiva founded the Research Foundation for Science, Technology, and Ecology in New Delhi, which led to the creation of an organization dedicated to the restoration of organic farming across India and the preservation of indigenous knowledge and culture. She is also one of the leaders on the board of the International Forum of Globalization with Ralph Nader and Maud Barlow and Jerry Mander. And for several decades, she's fought for changes in the globalized practices of agriculture and food. And she's traveled the world speaking against biopiracy of indigenous foods and their medicinal properties by large agricultural and pharmaceutical corporations. And her activist efforts have created grassroots organizations throughout the developing world to counter genetic engineering of crops as well as empower women throughout the third world. She has received numerous international awards, including the Alternative Nobel Prize, the Right Livelihood Award, and others. She is also the author of several important books, including Earth, Democracy, and Manifestos on the Future of Food and Seed. And her most recent is Soil, Not Oil. Her website is vandanashiva.org. And nice to have you back with us today.
It's a pleasure to be back.
First, I want to deal with the idea that we recently had a meeting of the G8 nations. All of them, without exception, are now supporting the globalization of seeds and agriculture and turning over the power to do that, to solve the world's hunger problems, to Monsanto. And as we know, Monsanto has a very nefarious background when it comes to putting people above profits. Could you take us, please, for those who may not be aware of why our president and the other presidents of other countries, like in France and England, why we should not have the approach we are taking now to genetic engineering as a way to solve the world's food problems. And you could maybe use some of the examples of the suicide rates in India and why, and the differences in genetically engineered seeds and heirloom organic seeds and farming techniques. So I'm going to keep quiet and use this much like a classroom on the air to really give us a primer, okay?
Well, the reason governments are so subservient to Monsanto is because Monsanto has worked over the last 30 to 40 years corrupting our governments. Monsanto is not just causing genetic pollution by introducing genetically modified crops, which then pollinate non-GM crops and make organic unviable. Worse, they literally pollute our democracy and make democracy unviable. So the single agenda of the White House is to push Monsanto seeds on little countries like Nepal and Haiti, where we then have to mobilize to say, keep your toxic genes home. The second reason why governments are falling into this trap is because of Monsanto's power of propaganda. Monsanto says we've increased yields of crops. That is not at all true. The technology doesn't allow it. The technology uses a gene gun or a plant cancer to introduce one gene with one trait or make stacks of single gene traits. The other properties of the plant come from the non-engineered plant. They come from the yield of the plant, they come from the resilience of the plant, they come from the taste, none of which genetic engineering can engineer. Engineering is a very crude method to deal with the complex systems that plants are and that life is. So the advantage really is two traits, herbicide-resistant crops and Bt toxin crops. So when you challenge them on yield, they say, we'll increase the yields by controlling weeds and pests. But what they've given us is super weeds and super pests. In India, they introduced the Bt cotton, which has increased pests and increased pesticide use. But worse, these seeds are genetically engineered for one purpose alone, to get a patent. I happen to be at a meeting where the industry laid out its plans in 1987, and they said clearly the reason we have to do genetic engineering is it's the only way we can get through the door of patenting seeds and patenting life, because now we can claim we have made something novel, and we are the creators, we are the inventors, therefore we should be the owners. What this means for us is they collect super royalties. And those royalties end up coming from poor peasants who borrow to buy the seed, who borrow for the pesticides, get into a debt trap, and 250,000, 250,000 Indian farmers have committed suicide since Monsanto entered the country and started to take over the seed supply. Farmers are being killed, but diversity is being destroyed. Look at the only crops that we are growing around the world, because that's where the royalties are coming from. Corn and soya and canola and cotton. As if there were no other crops humanity grew. We used to eat 8,500 species of plants, all of which are disappearing. And then they're killing other species. We've done studies that show 22% soil organisms disappeared within 4 years of cultivation of BT cotton. The bees are dying. Bees are dying not just because of the pesticides. The Cornell study recorded how butterflies, larvae fed with pollen from BT corn died, whereas the normal butterflies feed on the pollen. So we are seeing a destruction of life across the board. And the worst thing is these corporations are incapable of delivering anything we need. They can't give us a good seed. They're only capable of creating non-renewable and patented seed. We need seeds for climate resilience. They are taking patents on that, but they can't create climate resilience. And that is why I have started a campaign this year, global campaign for seed freedom, to save our seeds and to resist and question the patent laws that make it illegal to save seeds, and also are the reason our governments are destroying our seed freedom and our seed sovereignty. And I do hope you will take this on in a big way.
We are. I appreciate that oversight. Let's say that right now you had an opportunity to sit across from Bill Gates, the second wealthiest man in the world, who has spent billions of dollars through the Gates Foundation promoting genetically engineered seeds. And also he is a big believer in vaccines for developing countries and third world countries, so that the people will get their vaccines, but also be contraceptively manipulated so they can have children after these vaccines. He's actually made that statement, and we played that tape. If you could have a chance to speak with him and the President of the United States, President Barack Obama, on their policies of being 100% pro-Monsanto, pro-genetic engineering, pro-helping the poor, what would you say to them?
I wouldn't say anything to them. I'd just bring them to our farm. I'd let them see the 700 varieties of rice that we grow. I'd let them taste the delicious food that comes from that diversity. I'd let them see the butterflies and the bees and the birds that have come back, and the earthworm castings all over that are creating 10 times more nitrogen, 7 times more phosphorus than your fertilizers can ever give you. I'd let them experience the richness of biodiversity. I'd let them see that per acre on our farm, we can grow 2 to 3 times more food than conventional farming, and definitely provide more nutrition. The golden rice that is supposed to solve the problem of blindness is a pathetic 34 micrograms of vitamin A. Our crops have 1,400 micrograms. We are actually decreasing the nutrition availability through the model that Monsanto proposed and the model that Bill Gates and Obama are blindly supporting. I really believe in your mind is that closed. Just talking doesn't open it. An interaction with nature, an interaction with diversity, the activation of your taste buds, and the opening of your mind, that's what they need.
Take us a little further, if you would, please, into the suffering of the Indian farmer and why they're committing suicide. Why can't the government, why can't NGOs, why can't someone intercede? Because if I've understood the statistics, there's somewhere between 240 and 270,000 Indian farmers who've committed suicide. Could you tell us more about that, please?
The suicides really started in the late 90s, which is when globalization allowed the takeover of the seed supply by corporations like Monsanto, which formed joint ventures with some Indian companies, but they also locked other Indian companies into licensing arrangements. So in cotton seed alone, about 60 Indian companies are only allowed to sell Monsanto's BT cotton GMO seed. Now in America, they lock the farmer in directly with a contract. In India, they lock in the companies, so the companies aren't allowed to sell anything more. Then they influence governments. So I put in a request to know how many new varieties had our government released in the last few years since Monsanto came. Not one. So the farmer is encouraged to not depend on his old supply and buy these new seeds. The old seeds go. The government stops breeding. The older Indian seed companies stop breeding their own varieties. They pay royalty to Monsanto. So there's no other alternative on the marketplace. Now, the promise of these seeds is you're going to become a millionaire. You don't become a millionaire, you get into debt. And soon farmers know they can't pay back. Now, every suicide I know, because we've been studying this all along, every suicide I know is committed on the day the creditors, who are the agents of these seed and chemical companies, come to collect the land, because the credit was given against the land. That was what was mortgaged. And the day the farmer is losing the land, he goes quietly to his field, drinks a bottle of pesticide, and ends his life. The children don't know, the wife doesn't know. Someone finds the body lying in the field, comes back and tells the widow. Now, what we've done is, A, highlight the issue, to create an alternative. In these regions where the suicides are highest, and most of them are in the cotton belt, which is all Monsanto's cotton now, we started saving old, open pollinated varieties of cotton, distributing them, helping farmers go organic, and then helping them sell what they grow, helping the local weavers resurrect the weaving, creating beautiful clothing like Gandhi promoted, the hand-spun, hand-woven clothing, and we call it fibers of freedom. Because what Monsanto has brought is seeds of suicide. And what we spread, seeds of life, seeds of freedom, and the cotton derived from these seeds as fibers of freedom. So we are doing our little bit. We don't have Monsanto's deep pockets. We don't have the capacity to exploit the earth and to exploit the farmers. Every year they're taking out 10 billion rupees on cotton royalties alone. That's only India. We did a calculation of how many royalties they're collecting from Argentina, from Brazil, from Canada, from the U.S., it would be mind-boggling. There's a very powerful chart in the Forbes magazine of November the 6th, 2011. Why does Uncle Sam love GMOs? Why does Uncle Sam love Franken Foods? And the analysis is very clear. The U.S. is in a negative trade balance with on every other product, electrical, automobiles, textiles, everything. It's only one sector on which the U.S. has a positive trade balance, and that's agribusiness and seed royalties. That is why President Obama thinks that expanding Monsanto's empire is expanding the American interest. But this is not the American interest, because the American farmers are getting into debt. The American citizens are denied their right to know what they're eating. The American food diversity is being destroyed. This is anti-America if we think of America as the America of the people.
Thank you for those insights. My last area of questions has to do with what I believe many Americans, many people throughout the world have been doing for a long time and do today. You've heard of Scott and Helen Nearing. Are you familiar with them? The Nearings?
No.
In the 1950s, 60s,
no, I'm not.
For about 40 years, this couple lived on a small farm, 100% self-sustaining, and people, including myself, would visit with them, and you would see the ease by which they go through a day, where everything was just wonderful. I remember having a conversation with Helen Nearing, and butterflies were landing on her shoulder, and I thought, I've never seen that before. And she was a magnet of love in nature. I remember we were having a lunch outside, and a fawn came over. I don't know where the mother was, but the fawn came over, and Scott was petting the fawn and gave him some lettuce, and then he went back into the woods. We have lost the sacredness of food, because in part I believe we've lost the sacred connection with land. Land has been there to exploit, to tear down what was there, to build skyscrapers and malls and subdivisions, and something for our immediate use, but not looking at how that might impact us later on. So would you do this, please? Would you, from your perspective, talk about the spiritual conversation that we should be having between all humans about the sources of our food, the earth, and reconnect with that which is essential and sacred?
I think the recovery of the sacred is vital for humanity's future. First, because all the destruction that's taking place around us, including the destruction of our food, the destruction of the land, destruction of the earth, was rooted in the desacralization that was vital to allow a very narrow, mechanistic, reductionist worldview to emerge that thought of nature as dead and merely raw material to be exploited for industrial processes. And in the process, if you have to assault and rape nature, that is progress. If you have to destroy the sacred in indigenous communities, that too is progress. Why do we need this so badly? Because this desacralized war against the earth is bringing us to the limit of our survival on this planet. I will be going to the Earth Summit, which is 20 years after the first Earth Summit. And the central issue, at least I'm carrying and many people will be carrying, 100,000 Indian people, children, farmers, have signed the petition on the rights of Mother Earth. And of course that means bringing the sacred back to the earth, recognizing that the earth is our mother, the earth is inviolable, and her rights to continue to be able to provide for us are the basis of all our rights. Why do we need to do this with food? Because food becomes us. And if food is poisoned, our bodies are poisoned. We get disease. We are going to be releasing a new report in a few weeks' time. Poison in our food. What happened to Indian food system as we got rid of the idea of food as sacred? One of our most ancient texts, which has been a deep inspiration for me, is called the Taittiriya Upanishad. And this Upanishad is only about the sacredness of food. It says, everything is food, everything is something else's food. Basically, that's the food web, which is the web of life. And then it goes on to say something even more powerful. It says there is no duty on earth higher than the growing and giving of food in health and abundance. That's the highest duty of being on this planet. That's the duty our small farmers are being denied. That's the duty our organic farmers are being denied. That's the duty the seed savers are being told, no, you can't save seeds because seed is intellectual property of Monsanto. So in my view, bringing the sacred is vital because that's the reality. It's vital because it allows us to live better, more decently, and it's vital because that's the only way we're going to reduce the power of the Monsantos of the planet.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you sharing this with us. You're speaking to us now from your farm out there in India? Where?
No, at this point I'm in Delhi. I will be going to the farm.
The farm's at the foot of the
I'm
Himalayas?
In Delhi for the meeting.
Sometimes.
Yes, and you must come sometime.
All right. Well, you give me an invitation this summer in the month of August, do some traveling, and I'll come and film all this. I didn't know that.
The details.
I didn't.
Wonderful. Look forward to having you here.
Okay, we appreciate it. Well, there she is, Dr. Vandana Shiva, and I will be visiting there. And I might also invite some of the listeners to join me. Why? Because I've had hundreds, if not thousands of people say, gee whiz, all these trips you take, all these exotic and interesting places you go to film and love to see it. Well, on some levels, it is fun because you get to go to places most of the time you would not. These are not tourist attractions. Certainly going into Delhi, Mumbai, Calcutta, going up the different rivers through the country, seeing the people, speaking, learning about their customs and traditions. That's all very empowering. But it's also rough. Long travel, long days, lots of work. And when I go out to film, that's all I do all day is film. But this might be a trip, since it's a very special country, very sacred area, wonderful people, but also people who are struggling in the face of genetic engineering challenges. Might be worthwhile to see, let people come, pay their own way. You got to be a little rough, be able to get out there. But it might be worthwhile. I'll let you know when I'm going to schedule this. But I am definitely going over there and definitely going to film this whole beautiful environment. I thank you all for listening. Please download last evening's program. Go to ProgressiveRadioNetwork.com and download Progressive Commentary Hour. Powerful hour, 2 hours. Now, coming up next is Honesty Without Fear. This is the Whistleblowers radio program in the United States. Today's show exposes low industry with high risks, how big corporations intentionally overlook safety regulations due to the insignificant labor force in the United States. And we shouldn't allow that. We're happy to have this program on the air. Also, please call for the remaining few seats we have in Manhattan on June 15th for what will be, my hope is, a historic day where we see how we can stand up and say, no, we want our freedoms of choice. We don't want our democracy taken away and stolen by Monsanto and the FDA and USDA and their corporate sponsors. And we're asking everyone to watch this over the internet. It'll be free over the internet, or come join me in the theater. For that, you'll call 877-627-5065.
Progressive Radio Network is now on iTunes. Search for us to listen and download past shows or get them updated